Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Chitheads. My guest today is Manorama. Manorama is one of the leading teachers in the study of Sanskrit and yoga philosophy. She is the founder of both the Sanskrit Studies Method and the Luminous Soul Method. Manorama evokes healing through the universal arts of language and conscious living. Happiness, she often says, quote, is the free flow of energy, and communication is energy. When we use our voices authentically and confidently, we create harmony between ourselves and others. A renowned, highly respected teacher, Manorama offers Sanskrit Studies Method programs for yoga teacher trainings, as well as Luminous Soul Method trainings and retreats. She tours the globe, training students in the Sanskrit Studies Method and the Luminous Soul Method. So hello, Manorama. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me, Jake. Wonderful to be here with all of you at Embodied Philosophy. Love the idea and the concept.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited to share this podcast with our listeners because I think you have such incredible teachings to share.
Thank you.
But one of the first things I wanted to talk a little bit about is a little bit about yourself, your life, and the path that has led you to this inspiring educational institute for Sanskrit studies that you've created.
Okay, so what led me to where I am now, I guess, is I was kind of, like a lot of people say, you know, sometimes it's some sort of spiritual crisis that comes up in anybody's life. I was a very energetic kid. I had like more energy than, I started to notice as I got older, more energy than most people had as a kid. I was really filled with energy. And if that energy didn't get directed properly, it could have gone one way or the other. Luckily, my mom one day, she mentioned that there was something going on at this yoga center and there was a man who was going to be speaking. And I kind of squinted down and looked at her like, does my mom want me to do this?
You thought she had an agenda?
Yeah, I thought she had an agenda. I was 13 years old, and I thought, she's got an agenda, you know? But she was very cool and very, very cool. And she said to me, you know, if you want to go, whatever. And so as a result, I kind of went. And there was there was a man there whom I call Guruji. His formal name is Shri Brahmananda Saraswati. And prior to his taking sannyas, he was known as Dr. Ramamurti S. Mishra. And that was really a very historical moment for me, Jake, because everything changed after that. I was so riveted by the things he was saying. And I thought, frankly, there I was, 13, almost 14. And I was like, I cannot believe people are saying these amazing things. Why aren't more people here? Why aren't there more young people? This is so relevant to myself and to everybody around me. So that was a pivotal moment for me. Yeah, for sure. And I think also I come from a family of both artists and lawyers. And
interesting mix.
Yeah, quite a mix for sure. My mom's the artist. My dad comes from the long family of lawyers. And I guess, there's an analytical piece to the law work. There's a lot that goes in there. But in terms of the artistic piece, both of my parents were both extremely open people. And I didn't think of it at the time, but as the years have gone on, I think that level of openness, they didn't necessarily get into everything.
Right.
But they were always open to hear about it. And that level of openness actually created a lot of openness in me to be able to kind of look at things and allow the possibility of them to, be thought about and participate sort of in my very American upbringing. But my very American upbringing became half Indian and half American after the age of 13, after I met my teacher, whom I call Guruji. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So when you met Guruji, had there been previous in your life, had your parents been at all interested in yoga or any spiritual practices at all? Had that been?
It's a great question. It's a funny question because my father just asked me the other day over French fries, how did I meet my teacher? Which I am surprised that I was like, how do you not know this? How many times, right? But he didn't know the specifics. So my mother she used to take a class. She was a bit of a beatnik and a bohemian, my mom, and she took a yoga class in the town that I grew up in. And then from there, the woman mentioned that there were these classes in philosophy. And I think my mom went a few times and then eventually invited me to go up with her. So that's a bit how that started.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things I'd like to, since we're sort of talking about the subject of Guruji, what I think is really remarkable about your life compared to many contemporary yogis is your relationship with a guru.
Yes.
And this, relationship, which, as I'm sure you've noticed, has been somewhat castigated in recent years. Mm-hmm. And in my own understanding, it seems to miss a little bit of what the guru actually represents, in these kinds of... in these situations where gurus have been supposedly abusing their power. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what the guru actually represents, the overall kind of philosophy of the guru, for those that may have been swayed by, recent kind of discussions about, the hypocrisies of the guru or the corruption of the guru.
Wow. So the hot topic.
Yeah.
So nothing major, right?
No, not at all. Not here at Embodied Philosophy.
What day is it? February 1st, the month of Lord Shiva. Okay. So nothing major, everybody. Nothing major. Okay, so this is a big topic, and I'm well placed to say some thoughtful things about this topic. First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that there are times in life when people, through their own confusion, do abuse their power, and that is to be recognized. I want to say that in the beginning of the discussion. So before I get into the more luminous and beautiful aspects of tradition, and certainly the Guru Shishya tradition, which means the Guru student tradition, I want to say that up front, that there are times when, and there are many people who probably will be listening to this, or who will hear it in times to come, who have experienced an abuse of power, or a fracture of trust from, some experience, whether it's in the context of a yogic teaching or so on and so forth, or in other contexts in their lives, gymnastics or bike racing or whatnot, right? So, first of all, there's always this understanding that teachers are embodied. Seems to work well with our theme today. Teachers are embodied. And I'm going to start with an idea that I think is possibly of interest to your listeners and to people overall. There is a term for the word umbrella. In Sanskrit, the word umbrella is chhatra. It's chhatra with an aspiration at the beginning. So that's not random. It's chhatra. And then one day I asked this teacher who's high up in the Sanskrit world, why is the word for student chhatra or chhatra? So chhatra would be the masculine, chhatra for the feminine. I was just getting curious, which is, always a great place to work from in your practice. And and what happened was it spurred this beautiful dialogue about the tradition. And I thought I'd share a little bit with you guys here. So he said to me at the time that the umbrella is that, he said that all teachers, and he's somebody who really stands as a representation of the Sanskrit world. He said, all teachers are embodied beings. They come through the channel of embodiment. And I'll add my flavor to that. So I'm going to paraphrase. All teachers are embodied in this realm. And there are, as he mentioned, there are flaws to that, and there are beautiful qualities to that. The flawed aspects are not to be sent out into the world, is the idea. So that's why students become the umbrella of tradition. In other words, they're meant to hold the defects. The way that he put it was the defects of the teacher should be kept in part of that person's personal life, and everybody has them, right? Like, I think one of my defects is maybe I might curse a little too much, little known fact about Manorama, but...
That's welcome here on this podcast, by the way, if you feel called to.
Then that's good. But I always feel called to. But that doesn't mean that I don't value sacred speech or that I haven't devoted my life. And oftentimes contradictions are interesting in lots of different people. So in any event, maybe it's a link to my dad and my brother. I tip my hat to them on that. Yeah. But in any event, so this idea that the umbrella is the student, right? And so now I have so many pictures of umbrellas, and maybe I'll show you as you look around, you can see one over there, but students give me little pictures of umbrellas, and that's the symbol of the relationship between the teacher and the student, that the student must act as the umbrella and keep those defects down. Now, it's not that the student has to run around and keep the bad qualities of a teacher. Don't misunderstand it by grabbing a surface meaning. Mm-hmm. Let me give the interpretation. So, or my interpretation, which I've spent a long time immersed in. So the interpretation is this, that the student is going to grow in the light of the teachings, and there are human qualities to any embodied being. Mm-hmm. So the places where anybody has humanity, let us be aware of that. But at the same time that we're aware of that humanity, let us also look for the elevation point, and let the elevation points be the points that we kind of send more out into the world. So has this been abused? Have people been confused? Have there been, and I want to say this, have there been confused teachers who have been, who have made a lot of mischief, and not just mischief, but quite a good deal of suffering for people? Absolutely. Have there been students who've made a lot of mischief for their teachers? What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? On both ends, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever there's misunderstanding, there's going to be mischief and suffering. But like I always say, the guru shishya is a kind of relationship, one that we don't necessarily have as much understanding about in the West in its deepest sense. Mm-hmm. Now, and this is what I say to people, a mother is not the same thing to everybody. Some people say, oh, my mother was amazing. Other people say, I only wish my mother was amazing. So, we all have different experiences. Some people say, well, my dad was amazing. Other people say, my dad was a nightmare. Yeah. And my brother and my sister. So, I don't think we get rid of the concept of mother.
Right.
So in the same way, we really mustn't get rid of the concept of guru, but maybe we need to understand it a little bit more and study more about it, because it isn't synonymous with abuse. It isn't synonymous with confusion. It is, now I'm going to go into what it is. It is synonymous with the concept of light, which is where, with my work in Luminous Soul Method, it's not random that the word is luminous and that there's the word soul there. So first of all, luminous is light-filled. Sanskrit is the language of light, spiritual light, soulful light. And the tradition of the gurus is meant to embody, or is meant to signify the embodiment of the light that comes through an embodied being and is able to transmit that light and transform those who come into contact with him or her through that deep understanding. And that should be held as a sacred thing, as a respected thing, as a trusted quality. Let me pause for a second and just allow me this pause for 1 minute. I want to just sit with that. The word guru itself derives from two pieces: gu, which I always say is your gu, your muck, your darkness, and ru, that which removes, or ru means to ascend, to cross over. So that force which helps you cross over your darkness, or your avidya, which is your confusion, the places where you have darkness or your vision is obscured. The guru is a force. More than anything, it is a force. And then when an embodied being has purified their consciousness and truly understands the depth of the teachings, not only inside themselves, but has been able to understand it outside, they are able to really transmit that force, to put that force into action, and then you ascribe the meaning guru to that being. You call them Guruji for the masculine, or you can also call the feminine that, but more frequently you would call the feminine Guru Ma, or just a Ma, or Amma, and Guru could be called Guruji, or Baba, or Maharaj, or something of that nature.
Wow, that's such a beautiful explanation. Thank you for that.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And one thing that you said that I want to ask a little more about, and that really resonated with me, was your remarks about how the guru, what was the word you used besides disciple?
Shishya.
Shishya. Mm-hmm. The guru-shishya relationship in the West is not quite as understood as deeply. And I'm wondering if that is partly due to the socialization I feel like we have in Western culture to not surrender our power. You know, there's a sense in which, you know, we're often seeing, you know, imperatives to stand in your power or to be your own, you know, light, and to really be kind of socialized to be a very an individual that doesn't need anyone or is completely autonomous. So we have this culture of autonomy that's always, you know, around us. So I'm wondering if you think that that's partly related to this fear of really entering what appears to be a surrendering kind of relationship. And then also,
Speak to that for a second. So I think that, you know, first of all, some of the concepts need to be a little demystified. I think part of why the Guru-Shishya relationship is called into question is because there's not a single person watching this, watching or listening to us that hasn't experienced some fracture in trust. And one of the most profound are obviously when it's in the context of something sacred. I think of it like this, you know, sexuality can be incredibly sacred. And we all know that it can also be incredibly profane and it can be exploited. So it depends on how you want to engage it. And that's going to be based on so many factors. But I think that doesn't, the profane doesn't discount the sacred, and the sacred doesn't discount the profane. I mean, people are able to utilize them in both ways. And I stand on the side of engaging this topic and this focus from a very sacred perspective. For me, tradition came, I always say this, but tradition came for me, Jake, in a very good way. Mm-hmm. I had a guru who was extremely caring, who was interested in my, truly my soul's growth, development, and ultimate evolution. And not just my own, but all the people he came in contact with. And so for me, and he was lovely and delightful and sweet and knowledgeable. All of this came in a very positive way. For students so for me, the sacred is easily accessible in this way, and I stand up for that aspect of tradition. By saying that, I also am aware that there are times when the tradition doesn't show up that way for someone. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful that it showed up for me this way, because not only does it give me the strength to see that it showed up for me this way, but also for me to see, that level of trust and connection has actually given me enough space to be able to see the whole field overall, not just the field of my own experience. Mm-hmm. And that's very yogic. That's the capacity to have to have more vision. The yogis, I always say, they give up their perspective, their individual perspective, to see more universally. So I can see the ways in which, of course, that things could be misused and abused. But I think one of the key things is, and I spoke about this in a Periscope some while back, but the key is for us to start to learn how to trust ourselves. Mm-hmm. Then you will start to sense when you feel that you are in a place where there is knowledge, where there is clarity happening, and you'll also sense its opposite. Yeah, and I want to go back to one thing that also really stuck with me and I thought was really powerful is the idea that you mentioned, comparing it to a mother and a father. It's not that if we have a problematic relationship with those figures in our life, that means we throw out the function of the mother and the father. That's right.
In the same, and I think that really clarified that to me, actually, to hear you say that we don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and also to hold the sacred and the profane in the same experience of a spiritual trajectory, rather than trying to, escape from the profane, seemed also kind of resonant. Or to reject everything as profane or everything as sacred. Clearly if someone is abusive, that's not sacred and should not be treated as such. But that doesn't mean there's never moments where there can be true trust between a teacher and a student, where a teacher, albeit, dare I say, a guru, can actually view a student's practice, the places where they're clear, the places where they're confused, and help that student out of their love and their deep care for that student, and say, why don't you try this piece?
And if the teacher happens to be an asana teacher, they're going to find their way through that. If they're teaching through Sanskrit, they're going to find that, or through mantra. If it's philosophy, they're going to work through that field. So it depends. So I hope that answers, or that gives
definitely
a broader way for all of us to have a conversation about this very, very hot topic and very rich and meaningful discussion.
So what do you see as perhaps the symptoms, if that's the right word, of a culture, a wider yoga culture that's shirking itself of the guru shishya?
Guru Shishya. I love that.
We're going to do that all day. Shishya tradition.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the loss of the guru as something that we seek in our spiritual path, in the wider community. Do you see symptoms in terms of people's practice? Like, are there problematic things happening as a result of the loss of the respect for the teacher in this way?
Well, I'm not sure that the people who kind of stand with their, flags in the air, not having that. I don't know if they're necessarily against the teacher-student relationship. I think for them, there's a different road that works for them. And I actually have total respect for them. And I'm not trying to walk a middle path.
Right.
I'm just simply saying that for them, maybe that's not their journey. Like I told a student of mine a while back, he was a doctor and he was brand new. And I said, look, every healer has to recognize this. I am a healer. You are studying and about to become, you're becoming a healer. He's a doctor, but he's becoming a healer now, and he's full-fledged now. I said to him, you're not going to be everybody's doctor. You can't be everybody's doctor. And if you're a teacher, and that's the way by which you bring healing, or you channel that force, you're not going to be everybody's teacher, and your way is not going to be for everybody. Mm-hmm. So I respect those who say, you know what, that shit ain't for me. Mm-hmm. But those who say, there are a lot of people who say, that shit is for me. That tradition, that depth, I want access to. I want access to that level of trust. I want access to the there's something that happens between people when there's an intimacy. I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about an intimacy of spirit. That's a part of what is deep in the teacher-student relationship. An intimacy of spirit, an intimacy of trust that in a healthy relationship gets built slowly and steadily over time and with profound respect. So what do I think gets lost? I think when you work with somebody and you are able to really develop that, it fans out, Jake, into your entire life. Mm-hmm. So, I always say this about meditation. You don't really get anything from meditation. You just get everything from meditation. So in the same way, you get a sense of peace. You get a sense of ease. You can have distance between what you're immediately making meaning about and what's going on in your life. That's phenomenal. So, a teacher-student relationship of the tradition is still rare and incredibly beautiful. And I think you get access to something quite sacred in yourself. Yeah. And not to mention the vast corpus of knowledge, which in and of itself, for me, acts like they are mini gurus. Like each mantra for me has taught me almost like it's a sub-guru.
Yeah.
I'm sure for asana practitioners, it's the pose itself, like Sri K. Patabi Joyce would say, practice and all is coming. It's in the practice where there's another layer of that kind of unveiling of a teaching for oneself. Yeah.
I like that idea of the guru not necessarily as a particular figure in the more traditional way that we think about it, but the guru as, like you're saying, an aspect of the practice or a mantra.
Yes,
so that's really...
and that fans out into your whole life. The more deeply you go into tradition, the more that fans out into your life, and
you can see the world around you as a guru.
Exactly, and I don't mean you see it as like people use these pat
faces
phrases.
Of your teacher.
I don't mean that. I don't mean like you see like a little picture of your teacher walking around everywhere. I don't know why I'm doing this, but apparently Gurji did that. But I also don't mean that that it's a pat quip. Like I hear this phrase all the time, like everyone's your guru. Well, it's not that. It's that you start to listen to everything so deeply.
Right.
And you don't become like deep thoughts with Manorama or deep thoughts with somebody, but you just start to pay attention in a way that you would if something had a sacred quality to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit and ask you about the significance of spiritual names, because from what I understand, Manorama is not your given name, but that's your spiritual name.
That's right. My given name is Theodalvia.
Oh, beautiful.
Theodalvia.
So I'm wondering if you could explain kind of when you received your spiritual name and what aspect of your own kind of, what was significant about the place in your spiritual path where it made sense to be given a name? And then maybe...
That's so funny. You know, nobody in all my years, Jake, nobody's ever asked me.
Really?
They've asked me what my name means, but no one in all these years, it's been 30 years, has ever asked me how I got my name or what was the other part, the context in which I received it. So let me share a little something.
Nice.
This is hot.
You heard it here first, guys.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow. Let's see. So Guruji, everybody had a spiritual name. And it was funny when I met my teacher, I've said this before, but I didn't know that Guruji was not a name. I thought his name was Guruji, like there's Greg, Guruji, David, Mark. I didn't know that people looked for gurus. I was very young, as I told you before. But you know, after I spent maybe some time there, I started to notice that many people had these different names. I was sort of getting more curious about Sanskrit because Guruji was so steeped in the language and loved it so much. And he would ask, like, you know, somebody a question and they had a Sanskrit name, someone else. And I just started to get curious. So I started to ask, you know, how do you have that name? Like, where did you get that? Is that your name? Oh, no, my other name is Kim, or my other name is Mark, or whatnot. And more time passed. I'm listening more to Sanskrit, and I'm starting to get acclimated to the sounds, and I'm liking them, you know? And so I started to notice or sense an affinity. Then I was developing in my relationship with Guruji. I would go there after my classes in high school. You know, it'd be like math, and then I just couldn't wait to get out so I could get over there and hear Guruji talk about the meaning of life and all that jazz. And then one day, I spoke with my mother about it, and we both were going to request a name from Guruji together. So I was quite bold, obviously, as a 13-year-old, but I was still 13. So we did it together. And then Guruji said he would think about it. And sometimes it would take him a very long time, but his name for myself and my mother came very, very quickly, like right away. But sometimes it would take him quite a while for somebody to get a name. In my case, it was very fast. It was right in that moment. He just looked at me and then he said, he wrote it down. I still have the piece of paper. And he's very funny. He wrote Manorama, of course, which means, so everybody knows, Rama comes from the root ram, to play, to sport, to charm. So it has that quality of charming and playful. And then mana means the mind, but it can also mean heart. So in this case, it means charming to the mind, delightful, or charming to the heart. And it is also a quality or kind of a feeling when Rama is near, the god Rama, who is the playful Lord. There is the feeling of Manorama. So he wrote, you know, what it meant, and then he wrote Miss America. I still have it on the piece of paper, and I laughed so hard. But he was very funny. Guruji was, he called himself, or others called him, I guess, and then it started to become a term, the East-West Guru. So he always liked to find these little relatability points from the East to the West. And remember, he came to the United States at a time when yoga in the United States and in the West was very foreign. So he was one of the front lines of bringing these teachings here.
Wow.
Whereas we are now going like, okay, so they've made it all very accessible, but what's the real, or how do I find out that more traditional thing? So it's a bit of a, you know, it was a different time. So he would add these little cute things, and that's one of the things, and a couple of other things which are a little private. So I'll just,
you leave those out for today.
Keep those mysteries to myself. But it was a very meaningful moment for me. And he called me Manorama. And it's funny to have a second name or to have two names, I should say, because I don't think of it as a second one anymore. To have two names is really a funny thing. The people that know me as Thea, they're always like, you can't be, I'm in Manorama. They always think it's so like Manorama. They don't know how to say it. They're all freaked out. But people who know me primarily as the name Manorama, they're like, they get disoriented, like, Thea? Like as if you are a different person with the name. You are the same person, but the naming, there's something to be said about the naming, which I think is interesting for your listeners. And that is that the name is symbolic of some aspect of God. And so the more we hear ourselves called to that, the more we move towards that in our lives. And that's part of the meaning of that. It's not meant that, you sort of drink the Kool-Aid kind of a thing. Or you change your name because your name is so crappy. It's not anything like that. It's just meant to be that there's a way in which you're called towards light. And if you're called enough times, you're going to start to listen and sort of reach for that.
Wow. That's a really beautiful explanation. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So now we're sort of segueing nicely, I think, into this discussion about Sanskrit. And I'm going to ask almost such a basic question that it might even be a little trite. But I want to ask you, what's so special about Sanskrit?
Oh, mamma mia. Ay, Dios mío. Y... Oh, holy Shanti. What's so special about Sanskrit? Well, I've been trying to figure that out for the last 32 years. There's so many things that are so special about Sanskrit. I think for people who are interested in yoga, it is the one of the pieces that's so special is that it's a language of vibration, which we can talk about and we can speak more about, I'm sure. But for me, it's really a language of love. It is really a transmission of love from the rishis. Now, when we think of rishis, that's the masculine, or rishikas, the feminine seers, or those who are seeing deeply. They're like it's another term for yogi. They left for us these clues in the form of these poses, in the form of teachings, in the form of mantras, right? So they left this as breadcrumbs for us to follow. And if we follow it, we get to have a little taste of that. It's kind of like if I talk about my grandma, you're going to get a little bit of the feeling of what I know to be my grandma. You're going to get that sense. You're going to get the feeling of her embodiment as I understand it. So if you engage the mantra, you get this kind of access to this feeling. And the feeling is special. It's the feeling that the language gives you access to, which is so special. And that feeling is the feeling of your true self, if I can use that phrase without everybody, closing their eyes and going to sleep. But that feeling of the highest aspect of ourself, this kind of awakened but peaceful, energized but not neurotic energized. It's a kind of profoundly awake, energized state. And when we chant, we find it's easier to meditate. We feel more energized. We have more access to our essential prana. And the language is, it's linked with the wisdom of the seers. Now, if you say that in English, the seer, you're kind of like left with a bit of a, what? Like the seer. Okay, cool. So you write down the note, like it's linked with the language of the seers. But then what does seer mean? Well, seers, seer, to see in yoga or in Sanskrit, we call the word darshan. So when you go see a guru or when you see a spiritual adept, it's called having their darshan. It means to have their vision, to have their seeing, but also to be seen by them. There's something about the seeing. When you can see, you access what's called witness consciousness. And in the witness consciousness, you see the whole field. And it doesn't sound very sexy. I'm going to say this. It doesn't sound sexy, but I got to tell everybody listening, it's frickin' sexy as hell if you can just get your mitts into it and, stop the resistance to it, which, for years I was resistant to it. And eventually I was like, okay, what the hell is this thing about witness consciousness? And it dove in, and it's very sexy. And what I mean by that is it's incredibly alive, alluring, beautiful. It's there's so much wisdom in that space. So it is the language of the seers. In other words, it's revealing to me from what I've delved deep into and I teach this in my Sanskrit studies method classes, is that it teaches the code of the universe. So it'll teach you the mantra. It'll teach you how to propitiate a god, or to respect a god, or to just connect with Shiva, Lakshmi, Vishnu. But then, like you say, this is the month of Lord Shiva. You say, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. You say this, you're respecting Lord Shiva, but what else are you doing? What else you're doing is you're accessing, consciously or unconsciously, the field of the rishis and the rishikas. And that is no joke. And whether we're conscious of it today, eventually we will become conscious of it if we engage the practice.
Wow. So that's a call to arms for sure.
That's a
Check
call
out
to arms.
sanskritstudies.org.
Yeah, right. That's a freaking call to arms. But not just sanskritstudies.org. Check out the sounds, the mantras. Chant your favorite mantras. And people get worried that they're not going to pronounce it correctly. But, if you just start playing around, you got to start rolling around in the field. Don't try to on yourself. Don't try to perfection the thing before you can even play around in it.
So that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you then, and you mentioned this when you first started talking about Sanskrit, is the difference between, and so I want to maybe ask you to compare Sanskrit, a language like Sanskrit, which you're explaining so beautifully as being and mentioned as being a pure vibrational language, versus something like English, where we have essentially a representational language. So in English, we use words to refer, to signify objects out there. So there's a separation between the material world and the kind of conceptualization of the material world. Whereas from what I understand, Sanskrit is at least the deeper layers of it, it's not referring to anything outside of itself, but it actually is itself the material, or is itself, within itself, it holds a certain power. Whereas in English, perhaps the word is referring to something outside the word that has the power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're referring to a concept that we speak about a lot in the Sanskrit tradition, and that is Sanskrit is the language where sound and meaning are united.
Yes.
Whereas in other more composite languages, less mother languages, so the composite languages that are derived off of the mothers, there's a distance between the object and the sound or the word that you put to the object.
Right.
Is that what you're
Yes,
referring
exactly.
to? Okay. So what did you want to know about that? Can I speak about that?
Yeah, just because for those who are raised in a culture in which they only have the English language as sort of a measuring tool to understand, what is a language? What is the significance of a language that what you're speaking about has this kind of pure vibratory power? Like, how can somebody who only understands the English language grapple with that or understand that?
Well, they're going to have to do some grappling for sure. I mean, you're going to have to sift through your perspective a bit to get to the other side. I mean, anybody who comes here and speaks Russian first, they're going to speak a Russian version of English before they speak English. So, I call it a Manoscript. I say when you come, don't make the mantra a Manoscript. It's like asatoma satgamaya tamasoma jyotir gamaya mrityurma mritam gamaya. That's a kind of a Manoscript, and I tease people and I say, in Miami, there's always a bit of the Sanskrit going on. There's a bit of prasarita padota nasana, We see from where we stand, Jake. We see from where we stand. And so the job of the yogi in training is to try to get outside of where we stand, and you give up protecting your personal perspective to see a much more wide, vast scope so that you can get access to the whole field, not just this limited field. So Sanskrit is a mother language off of the Proto-Indo-European source language of the Indo-European family of languages. And it is a language where sound and meaning are united. And so when you study the different mouth positions, of which there are 5 in Sanskrit, so I'm going to say this again, there are 5 mouth positions in Sanskrit. Let me go slower. And all the sounds of the alphabet come out of or emanate out of one or a combination of these 5. When you engage sounds, they direct energy to different points on the palate. that palette will go to different points, or the vibration from those sounds will go to different points in the body. The heart, which doesn't need an explanation. The throat, the seat of communication. And then the head, which is the seat of consciousness. So if I say the word Krishna, I have all these sounds at position 3, which is directing the energy to the top of my palate, which is then bringing the energy to the crown of my head. So now I'm vibrating, bringing vibration or energy to the crown of my head. And I'm starting to have this actual godlike or luminous experience where I'm feeling myself beyond my form as I say the sound, right? And the word itself is God or Krishna. Guruji also described Krishna as that force which never crashes. That's his own little playful etymology. But Krishna means a force that draws in and in. So the more we vibrate the energy at particular locations, the more we feel that, we become curious to go in and in. The more we go in and in, the more we feel our own God consciousness. And that's all on some conscious or unconscious level experienced, as you say the word Krishna, Rama, Durga, all these different sounds. Does that give something?
Yeah, that's a beautiful description.
Okay, great.
Nice. So now I want to ask you a little bit about the Yoga Sutras.
Ooh.
And on your website, your course is mentioned or is titled "Immersing in the Secret Code." So first, I want to ask you why the secret code. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I'd love for you to kind of unpack that. What is the secret code?
The secret code is a whole course, but there is a code underneath the code. Our habit is to take something and generally to see it from a surface level. But if you want to go deeply into the yogic teachings, you have to get beyond the veil. You have to get beyond the, you have to see behind what's truly being meant, and you have to know how to read that code. So, for example, I think maybe it'll be helpful if I give an example. For example, Patanjali doesn't describe, in the first chapter, he doesn't say Om. He says God is called Tasya Vachakaha Pranava. God is called by the sound Pranava. But Pranava is that force which is always new. He doesn't say Om. But you have to be able to read the code to know that Pranava is a signifier for what is always new. And what is always new, Jake, is pulsation. And that's why the yogis say, focus on pulsation, feel that vibration, because it's always new. Now follow me here for a second. What is new is what captures the mind. The mind always wants what's new. So the more you focus on vibration, the more it quiets and absorbs the thinking mind. And there you get the opportunity to experience what you are beyond your thinking mind. And you access that rishi experience for however long that it's sustained for. So did I answer that?
Yeah, you certainly did. Yes, very well. And another question I had, in my own kind of studies of the Yoga Sutras, particularly Edwin Bryant, whose work I really have enjoyed reading his translation of the Yoga Sutras. He talks a little bit about, and other scholars as well, about how the Yoga Sutras is essentially a renunciant text. I mean, it really does seem to prescribe a kind of ultimately a very seemingly isolated practice. So I'm wondering how relevant is the Yoga Sutras for what today seems like really more of a householder practice, and also for a practice that seems to be so committed to integration with the body, where in the philosophy of the Yoga Sutras we seem to have a call to extract consciousness from the material world, prakriti, and so to the body.
Well, okay. So first of all, I think every person has something that they're bringing to the table, and they can speak about that. I haven't studied so deeply all the different scholars' works and interpretations of the various important yogic texts, such as Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutra, etc. However, let's just say about this idea that it's a renunciate text, it certainly is speaking about the need for a measure of internalization. The Yoga Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, they're speaking about a need for internalization. And what I mean by that is a deep attention to the internal. And it just so happens that as you live in the manifest world, it can feel like everything is not aligning to get you to go that way. I mean, I wake up in the morning, and if I don't have the strength to hold myself to the set practice, then I too can get swept up with whatever is demanded of me that day. I'm sure people are listening to this and they can relate. However, when you build a strength through your practice, you don't get swayed. You hold to that. Now, the internalization is what is needed by that renunciate thing. So you renounce the family, you renounce. Some people are going to go, I love renunciation, I'm so down with that. Other people are going to go, what a crock of shit, I want nothing to do with that, right? Good luck to those people. I'll wave to them on the street, and I'm not interested. You have to find what works for you, but I actually don't feel that those texts are, and I never felt this way, even though I studied under a renunciate, ironically, but I feel that the texts are talking about the need for deep immersion in contact with yourself. That requires time away from the world, or at least a pullback from your focus on an outer level, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be in the world, but it definitely demands, in order to engage the practice deeply, I do think it demands, it's easier and it's just more supportive to kind of pull out for a time. But I know, and I've always felt this way about my own path, that I'm a real mac and vegan cheese American, you know? I mean, okay, back in the days it was mac and cheese, now it's mac and vegan cheese, or it's, what I'm trying to say is, you know, it's ivory. Okay, now it's the sort of the organic ivory, but you get my meaning. It's like I was very Americanized, and yet I was training under this guru who was a renunciate, who was deeply involved, ensconced, immersed in the deep teachings of yoga and living them, embodying them, to use our word. And at the same time, I felt that probably my understanding would be a bridge. So, and I think that has definitely come to pass as the years have unfolded. So I really understand these teachings through that bridgey perspective. Is that what I bring to the table? Absolutely. Could you say that somebody else can bring something else and can make a case for renunciation? Totally. Yeah. For me, I say to people, look, it is work. There's no way around it. But you can either go to the cave, which is a lovely thing to do. I just happen to like nice hair, and I like my earrings, and I generally like my nails done, although I have to do that soon. But
lucky this is just audio. They can't see
luckily.
it.
Yeah, exactly. But if, you know, at the same time, this is what I say to people. If you want to go deeply into the yogic path, you will have to put work in, but you want to make everything an entry point. So you have to find a way to make everything an entry point. And that's a skill that you have to learn. You need to study with a teacher or read a lot and develop, and then you can make everything an entry point. And you could certainly, in the way that I teach the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, I should say, to be clear, because there's so many Gitas in the world. There's the Devi Gita, you know, the Saraswati Gita, so many Gitas. But the Bhagavad Gita, or the Yoga Sutra, they can be used as renunciate texts, and they can also be used as markers for going more deeply within yourself, an inspiration to say there's something really rich and profound when you pull back from the periphery of your life and you go in, and here are some of the ways you can do that. Here are some of the metaphors. The secret code that I say is that it's told, sutras, not the sutras, let's stay with that. So the sutras are told, they're like one-liners, you know, in a kind of colloquial English, they're a bunch of one-liners, but they're not one-liners. They're very rich. And the more that you go into that, like you'll have like pages and pages of commentary on one sutra that's, you know, tiny. It's really short. The whole idea in Patanjali's time, and those who came before him, who were also amazing, that he built his work on, was about not wasting a single syllable. It was a big teaching. We don't waste a single syllable. We don't waste one syllable. So the idea of the prana being precious utilizing it effectively was very present in the yogic tradition, in the Sanskrit tradition, which are one and the same. And it takes us a while. The secret is, how do you thread things forward? How do you bring back what came after? Because in a text like the Yoga Sutra, they don't restate things. They have potentially had a very short window to say, this is this. Mm-hmm. So I'll give a simple example. The definition of yoga is given in Sutra 1.2. Yogaschchitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the process of the cessation of the vrittis, these misidentifications, slowing down or coming to a place of rest on the field of the chitta, on the field of the mind, ego, and superego. Okay? So you take that definition has to thread through the entire text. He doesn't need to restate it again. Whereas in a text like the Gita, you restate things. You have more room. You have up to 44 syllables and, generally speaking, 32 syllables to say what you want to say. Mm-hmm. So in the Yoga Sutra, like I said, if you're interested to go on the path of renunciation, you could certainly study it from that perspective. And I would say that, it's a beautiful path. If you're wanting to be more in the world, you can still derive profound benefits and teachings of yoga.
Yeah, so what I hear what you're saying is really that the texts themselves are open to the interpretation based on, the experience of the practitioner. It's capable of being reimagined in both a householder way and a renunciant way.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said. Yes.
Great. So now to the Bhagavad Gita, which you mentioned.
And also, let me say this, Jake, mm-hmm. also it can be of great value to both groups, so to speak, you know? And so both of these texts. So, okay. You were going to
so now, the Bhagavad Gita, and your title for this course on your website is the Warrior Within, which I like because it seems to, and maybe you'll disagree with this interpretation, but it seems to point to a more allegorical interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. And the reason I ask that is because maybe it was actually yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, on a comment I had put out, or a post I had put out on Facebook, a friend of mine commented asking a question. He's not a yogi, but he's familiar with the Bhagavad Gita in a relatively shallow way, but he nonetheless asked, what is the connection between yoga and a narrative that seems to be encouraging the dutiful murder of one's brethren? So in other words,
I love that. It's such a dramatic. I love his drama. I love the drama of him. Send him over to my class. I want to can he write some dramatic statements?
I'm sure he could. Yeah.
I love that, and I appreciate that. I appreciate these different qualities that each of us bring to the table. So he says, you repeat it so I can.
Yeah, he says, what is the connection between yoga and a narrative that seems to be encouraging the dutiful murder of one's brethren?
Yeah, well, you could see how that could be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
That's got a bit of a problem in it. That's why it requires, and, I recently interviewed my brother for a discussion on art and spirituality. And in our discussion, we were talking about, my brother was saying, everybody thinks that art is ancillary. But every civilization since time began has had artists. Mm-hmm. So that means, by de facto, that art is endemic to people, to society, to humanity. Yeah. And he was talking about that, and he was saying, I think we need more people. I think artists are translators, and I was saying they're like the shamans of our time. Artists they're like translators for the information of the world of the time that they find themselves in. So. Somebody can say, if they sit on the surface of the text, that it's like a text about murder and bloodshed. We have another text that's very similar. We have this goddess text. The goddess, she kills so many times. She slays and slaps and punches and stabs, and she does all this stuff, right? And somebody who's not very well, I guess, could take that text and make it, they could use that to back up their argument, right?
Like a militarized agenda. Yeah.
Fundamentalist agenda. But if we look to the interpretation of the yogis, which is how the text came to me and how I've come to understand it, it's reflecting, as my teacher used to say, it's reflecting the battle that we all have to go through for understanding our own nature. He said, even getting up in the morning is a battle between you and the snooze. And he said, sometimes You tell God, he used to say this directly, Gurji used to say, sometimes you tell God you will meditate lying down and then you find you have lost the battle. So just waking up in the morning is a battle, let alone waking up to who and what we are. Knowing that you are something more than the body and mind, that you are something much greater is one thing. Living from that experience as an embodied being is quite another. Is quite another.
So how would you respond then to somebody who, and I do know of people who have a very literal, like they believe that the battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas really happened, and that it really is essentially they take as being very real the discussion of, when it is your duty to go to war, so there is a sense in which it's apologizing for a certain necessary militarized answer to a certain situation. And people that want to be more, I guess, pacifist practitioners would find that to be very problematic. So how do you respond to somebody who does want, to the people that do literally interpret the Gita in that way?
In a militaristic way? Or in a kind of like a collapsing way, either one?
Yeah, either one.
Or both. How do I respond to them? I respond delicately. I tend to respond rather delicately. I have great respect for all people's perspectives. I stand in my own understanding.
Yeah.
Let me think. I try to look to what they're actually trying to tell me. Mm-hmm. So if they use it in the context of a fundamentalist nationalist discussion, or if they suffered some abuse of their own, or if they've suffered some oppression, then I respect that was part of their journey and that it was painful for them and that they are working through that piece to the best of their capacity. But we're probably not going to be in the same classes together.
Right.
Yeah. So I respect them, but I don't necessarily, I wouldn't stand on the same, like I said, class with them, or we wouldn't stand in the same viewpoint around it. But that said, I probably, actually one thing that I would probably do is get curious about the fullness of their argument. I wouldn't just reject it because it wasn't mine. I would kind of go, okay, let me listen and let me hear and let me see what's of value that they're saying. And then let me see if there are places that we can connect. Because Guruji used to always teach me that look for a man or woman of unity. Those are the people who are great in this world. The disunity, the ones who are always saying it's not this, it's this, and not that, it's this. That's very easy. That's so easy to come by, but to look for points of connection. So I think at this stage in my life, in my development, I'm also looking always for points of connection. I would probably look to their argument, and while I may not agree with it in certain areas, I would listen for the places where we could come to some kind of harmony and thereby stand in the light of yoga together. That's
That's a very diplomatic response.
Yeah, no, it's not just diplomatic. It's actually from training. It's actually like training in the process of yoga. So that doesn't mean that that I might not say like, this is bullshit or that's bullshit. But at my real core, I would look for points of connection.
Yeah, that's the wise thing to do, it seems.
Yeah, I would try that.
So I have a couple more questions, and then we're nearing the end of our beautiful discussion. But I wanted to ask you, sort of going back to your own practice in history, what does your daily sadhana look like today?
Well, it always consists of meditation. It consists of breath practice. It consists of, when I say meditation, I say yoga meditation, to be clear. So it consists of quiet meditation, of witnessing the mind. It consists of chanting specific mantras that I was given by my teacher, as well as some that I've added along the way, that depending on what's happening, like if there's a certain festival on, I'll be maintaining what's called a puja, or I'll maintain a specific, festival. Let's say the goddess period happens twice a year. So during those festivals of the 9 days, I will be chanting specific mantras. Or let's say someone that I know that I'm very close with has fallen ill, or if someone has passed, I'll say special mantras in honor of them. So that depends. A lot of people I'm sort of a go-to person for this is happening that's very difficult in my life. And so I have a lot of people that I say mantras for on a daily basis. Quiet meditation, silent meditation, watching the mind and watching the movement of what I call the wave, which we can talk about another time. And chanting and breath practice. And then I love walking. And it's so funny. I remember, I think it was St. Augustine. I found this note that my mom left when my mom passed out of her body. She always had little notes everywhere, and she was a real mystic, my mother. And one thing she wrote on a Post-it that I found, it said, "It is solved by walking." And it was by St. Augustine. And I it was just such a beautiful note. It was the moment I found it was very poignant. And so I love to walk in nature. And it's funny because I live in Manhattan on the Upper West, but there's a little park, the Riverside Park, that I go to.
I love the Riverside Park.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. And there are these trees that have become my friends. So that has been incorporated in the last few years, that I spend almost every morning. I go over and say hello to my friends, the trees, and I listen to their essential pranic nature or whatnot, Sometimes I hug them, so you may find a woman over there by the river hugging a tree.
Yes.
Oh, God. But I like to, at least have my hair done when I do it. So we try to find that balance point, right?
I love that. That's such a rich sadhana, and I really actually love hearing that walking and just being with your friends, the trees, is part of your sadhana, because it incorporates, a less than conventional, in a way that people traditionally think of as sadhana, incorporates a less conventional practice into your daily sadhana, and shows that, anything can really be incorporated into sadhana as long as there's a sort of sacred intention behind it.
That's right. That's right. And I think that for me, asana, I have a spine injury. I don't know if you're aware of that or other people, but I have a serious spine injury from a car accident. So I have to be careful with the asanas, more careful than is easy to explain in a quick minute on the thing, on the talk that we're having here. So, but I was a martial artist. That was the way that I came sort of through the physical practice. And I was a kung fu artist for years. I know, watch out. Watch out. Well, more contradictions to go around. But I was deeply involved in martial arts. And so I would train with Gurji, and then I would go to the city, into the Chinatown, and I would study martial arts twice a week. So that became really my physical practice. And then after my injury, walking became more of a staple in my practice. Yeah.
That's cool.
Funny, right?
All right. Yeah, really funny, but awesome. Okay, so wrapping things up, I just wanted to ask you a bit about your own goings-on, workshops. I know I've mentioned the courses quite a bit that you have. So if you want to maybe share an upcoming course that's launching soon, or a retreat that you're doing, or anything you'd like the listeners to know about.
Sure. Well, we have a lot of things happening. One thing is we're about to have the I Am Luminous Urban Retreat. This is something that I started a couple years ago, and it's really taken off, where people can come to New York City or other urban environments where this is fanning out, and they don't have to necessarily go to Costa Rica, although I love going to Costa Rica.
Right, who doesn't?
And I think it's awesome to go do that also. So it's not going to replace anything, but it's just an option. It's a way for students to take these teachings and this experience of tranquility and how to work with the Luminous Soul Method teachings and Sanskrit studies in your daily practice. So we have this urban retreat. Last year we had people from 30 countries.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
This one is happening March 11th. Just look here, March 11th to the 13th. It's going to be on the east side. If you're interested to join us, hop along, Cassidy, join us. You can check out more information at sanskritstudies.org. And I'll be teaching Luminous Soul meditation. I'll be teaching some aspect of the Luminous Soul pillars, and we'll be having wisdom discussions. And then there'll be ample time for students to go and take asana classes, or to kind of spend the weekend, if you wanted to invite a friend, let's say, but you would take the portion of the retreat, and then you could spend the rest of the time with your friend in the afternoon and evening. So there's ample time for both. That's coming up, like I said, March 11th to the 13th. And then the other event that I have happening is the Luminous Soul Method teleclass series, where, I'm not going to be offering this course for a while after this. So this is the method that I realized, the 9 pillars of a soulful life, where if you study these various pillars, the 9, you come to actually start to learn how to bridge these yogic teachings into your life. Yoga teachers often study with me. That sort of is my thing as a teacher myself. And they often will say something to me, Jake, like, I feel like a fraud. They just pull me aside and they tell me this. But you know what's funny? Not just one. Lots. And I don't think they're frauds. And I always say, you're not a fraud. And they say, yeah, but I think what they're trying to say is I feel like something is not come together for me. Something's not authentic. So this is a bit of a response to that, certainly, but it's something that I realized after over 20 years of teaching these 9 pillars. And then I give very manageable exercises how to take these teachings into your life and work with these very simple weekly exercises through this teleclass format where you can develop your practice. So this is happening. And then in April, so this is happening March 15th, Tuesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. And then you can hear more through the various social media platforms and so forth that I have Sanskrit Studies and Manorama Facebook page. I'll be announcing more about the Song of the Luminous Soul, which is a year-long training in the Bhagavad Gita. So you can hear about that.
Those are awesome offerings you've got going on.
Yeah.
And then my last question, one of the offerings I have on the website is what I call the Embodied Philosopher's Library, and it's a collection, it's basically a very long annotated bibliography of a lot of yoga, philosophy, and wisdom books that I kind of wish I had when I first started looking into all these teachings.
Fabulous idea.
Yeah, so I always ask the interviewees if they wouldn't mind sharing a couple of books that have been really transformative for you that you might want to recommend.
Right now, like verbally, or you?
Yeah, verbally, and then I'll put them on the.
Well,
on the
you
form.
probably have some of the ones that I've mentioned, but
perhaps.
I would say, and a must-have are several copies of the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutra. Must have several copies. You need several copies to hear different interpretations and to come to your own deeper understanding. I would say the book I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, which is a question and answer. That's an invaluable book that you want to read in short segments. I would say the Be As You Are by Sri Ramana Maharshi. And then in terms of Sanskrit texts, I would say more than just the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutra. I would say a wonderful translation of the Ramayana is by a man named Ramesh Menon. It's so beautiful. I mean, he's so steeped in tradition because his translation, it's not a word-for-word translation. It's a retelling, but it's excellent. It's just excellent and very poetic and very well written. And then I also think, a great thing for a person who's studying yoga is to have a proper Sanskrit dictionary. Can I just give my plug for this? And my favorite dictionary for students to begin is most of us want to do English Sanskrit. I'm going to say do English Sanskrit, but also think about getting a Sanskrit English. And Apte is a fantastic resource, APTE. You can get it off of Amazon or any of the various channels, probably Barnes & Noble. But Aptes is fabulous. And finally, I would say maybe something like the Atma Bodha by Sri Shankaracharya or the Aparokshanubhuti. So these are some...
Thank you. Yeah, those are some great texts. Awesome. I'll put those in the show notes and put them also in the library so people can access that. That's excellent. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Manorama. This has been such a rich and beautiful discussion. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I've had a wonderful time being with you.
Absolutely. So thanks again, Manorama.
Thank you so much, Jake. What a wonderful pleasure to be here with your beautiful program, Embodied Philosophy, and this, I think you call it, what do you call it, chit heads?
Chit heads, yes.
I love that. That's so cute. Thank you. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to participate, and I wish all the listeners this small Sanskrit blessing, which is Shivaste Santupanthana. May your paths always and continuously be blessed. Be blessed, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, everybody, there you have it. That was our interview with Manorama. If you want to find out more about Manorama's offerings and the incredible courses that she has coming up through her website, check out sanskritstudies.org. sanskritstudies.org.